You boys can wait outside while I finish the porridge. Yes, honey, I know to make yours piping hot. I'll be out in just a second. What? I have a life outside of YouTube, you know. Goldilocks and the Three Bears, Rapunzel, Little Red Riding Hood, Hansel and Gretel. We've all heard of them before. Fairy tales, one of the first stories we ever learned while growing up. And recently, I did a little research on them for a paper. The paper was about Spider-Man. Don't ask me how those two have anything in common. Fairy tales have a rich and colorful history worthy of exploration. And also, I fell down this really deep rabbit hole of Wikipedia pages and I learned that fairy tales are really weird and also really sexualized for some reason. And one more thing, take everything I say with a grain of salt. I'm no expert, I'm just a stupid stick figure on the internet. So boys and girls, come with me through this enchanted forest as I tell you the wonderful world of fairy tales. Hopefully we don't get eaten, kidnapped, impaled, or dismembered. A little disclaimer, this video gets pretty weird and violent, even for my standards. But like, it's the same stories they told kids back in the day, so like, how bad could it be? Remember the fairy tales I listed at the beginning of the video? Those were all European fairy tales, because pretty much all fairy tales we grew up with were from Europe. A lot from Brothers Grimm. Grimm's a particular last name. Really reflects the stories they published. Anyways, we are going to be focusing on European fairy tales, because they're the ones we grew up with, and also the only ones I know. Except for this one Korean fairy tale my mom told me about why the toad has a bumpy back. I mean, I have some bigger questions about the creation of our world and the reasons of the universe. But sure, we can dedicate an entire story to toad backs. I'm getting off topic again. You guys remember Goldilocks and the Three Bears, right? Of course, the story about Goldilocks, the cute little girl with those golden— wrong! Originally, it was about a grumpy old homeless lady and not some innocent little girl. She barged into the bear's home and did all the just right things we all know. Then she wakes up and sees the three bears surrounding her, jumps out of the window to escape, and either dies or runs away. Depends on which version. Not exactly what we're used to. Well, at least the bears seemed nice. They didn't even attack the lady. If she died, that was her fault for jumping out of a two-story window. Those bears were probably chill. The second iteration of the story actually introduced the Goldilocks we were all used to. Originally, her name was between Silverlocks and Goldilocks. Silverlocks was the cute little girl that everyone loved. Did I say Silverlocks? Sorry about that, I just have another cute and beautiful girl in my head right now. Anyways, in that version of the story, she is burned alive, doused in water, and impaled on a church steeple. Looks like they have a little picture to go along with it and everything. The bears are doing a little silly little dance too. These are the stories they told kids in the 1800s, by the way. Turns out these bears aren't good people. Goldilocks and the Three Bears are an analogy about learning how to poop. How about Little Red Riding Hood? Don't we all love that one? Little girl in red gets tricked into being eaten by an evil wolf. She and her grandma get saved by the hunter. This one's an analogy for sex. And no, it's not because the wolf swallowed the little girl. Why'd you even think that? That's disgusting. Absolutely vile. Is it because he's a wolf? Furry? I mean, it's okay if you're a furry. I'm sorry if I hurt your feelings. It's an analogy for what it is, because it's about a big, powerful figure tricking a little girl. You're gonna need to be able to fill in the blanks for that one so I don't get demonetized. I'm already on YouTube's bad side for submitting McLovin ID as my age verification. It didn't work. Now, what about the part where they stuff a bunch of rocks in the wolf's stomach? How does that connect with the metaphor? Overall, I think we all learned here that if a powerful man tricks a girl, then the man will end up with countless rocks in his stomach. That's a very compelling message. Almost as compelling as, if you're a little too curious, you're gonna end up impaled on St. Paul's churchyard steeple. As you can tell, these children's stories aren't exactly child-friendly, and I only mentioned two fairy tales so far. There's a story called Fitcher's Bird, where there's a room full of corpses of mutilated girls. Then in the story The Juniper Tree, the evil stepmother tricks her stepson into a room, decapitates him, chops him to little bits, serves him as stew to the kid's dad. Don't worry, the son gets reincarnated as a bird and goes on a mediocre isekai fantasy adventure with a concerning but attractive woman in his party. Maybe I've been watching too much anime. I mean, to be fair, these stories were around the same time doctors came into your homes dressed in the black cloak with the Grim Reaper and told you to do crack cocaine. You know something interesting I learned while researching? There's a common trope in fairy tales called the youngest son or the third son. Essentially, in these stories, the first two or more sons are always tricked or defeated, and then the last son ends up successfully defeating the monster or outsmarting the witch or whatever. Yes, technically this archetype didn't appear in any of the fairy tales I mentioned, but I think it makes for a very interesting modern parallel. Back in the day, the third son wasn't exactly the best son. The first son would inherit all the father's land, and if he died, that means the second son would inherit. So for the third son to inherit the land, two sons need to die. Not exactly ideal odds. That's why the third son wasn't exactly looked very highly upon. I mean, your future was pretty much screwed over the moment you were born. And that's why I think fairy tales try to attract that demographic. Made the third son feel special because no one else likes them. He's the smart one, the strong one, the resourceful one. And that gave them this weird complex. I personally feel like that's very similar to how in modern rom-com animes, the antisocial black-haired protagonist who loves to read and watch anime ends up with a super attractive and popular girl. Then all the losers who are watching think they're special like him and then get this weird complex. Here's the thing for those third sons and antisocial losers. Those stories are just that. Stories. Fictional stories. Ogres aren't real. Witches aren't real. Women aren't real! Yes, I can criticize all you weebs because I'm also an antisocial loser who watches an unhealthy amount of anime rom-coms. I'm just a puppet who can see the strings. Maybe I've been watching too much anime. In conclusion, fairy tales are weird, and why do you think it was a good idea to teach every children about them? Also, comment other messed up fairy tales. I'm barely scratching the surface with this. I know Pinocchio's is pretty crazy. Forgot what it was though. Now, wasn't that a fascinating story, kids? Huh, kids? Where are you all in this dark and perfectly safe forest? Whoa, look at that empty house with that very obvious bear footprints outside. Can't wait to be turned into an analogy about pooping. Hey, I'm back. This video took a longer than expected because of one reason, and it's because I kept putting off making this end card because the mic sucked and I needed to like tweak all the settings, and it took a long time. Well, yeah, so certified weebie fact is the first female vampire was a lesbian, which would have made more sense in my previous video, but whatever, it's here now.